Hey guys, it's Kimellz. How's it going? I hope everything is going good in the quarantine. Today I decided to be productive and I'm gonna film another unsolved uncini. This is my third one. I'm going to post my last one. I hope it's this corner. I always get the corner wrong. And if you want to watch my first ever unsolved uncini, it would mean a lot to me. I posted it 2 years ago and I'm gonna put that right now. I really hope it's this corner. If it's not, then it's right here. Today we're gonna be talking about one of my favorite mysteries slash disappearances, which is about the lost colony of Roanoke. You may or may not have heard about it. I know American Horror Story did a full season about it. It was crazy. It's one of the reasons that it just gives me chills, not because the situation is scary itself, just like, American Horror Story is scary as shit. So anytime I think about it, I just get flashbacks from the show. So let's jump right into it. On May 8, 1587, approximately 120 settlers set sail from England to Roanoke Island, which is now known as North Carolina. Their leader was Governor John White. He led all of the settlers there on their journey to this new world. The voyage took approximately 3 months. They set sail May 8th and they got there around July. It's unsure what date, but they got there July 1587. So the first month that they got there was pretty brutal. There was a lot of disputes and fighting between the settlers and the Native Americans who originally lived on that land. Things got really intense. This could be due to the fact that before John White's settlers got there were 2 failed settlements to Roanoke Island. So the first settlement actually is what started all this drama. When the first group of settlers got there, the governor, who wasn't John White, he was some other guy who came with the first group, he actually killed the king of the local tribe and also tried to civilize them, as most white Europeans tried to do as they took over other people's homes. With all this back and forth fighting, the colonists were actually really worried that they wouldn't be able to survive on this new land, so they pleaded John White to go back to England and get more food, supplies, and more people, because even though there were 120 of them, apparently that wasn't enough. They felt like they needed more people either on their side or to help them fight or whatever the case may be. So finally, John decided to head back to England. He set sail August 25th, which was just 1 month after he got there. John was actually leaving a wife, a daughter named Eleanor White Dare, and Eleanor actually gave birth to a daughter, and she was the first English child to be born in the New World, and her name was Virginia Dare. Imagine going on the ocean for 3 whole months, like dealing with that, only to be like, I forgot some shit at home, let me go back. Like, that must really suck. So anyways, he set sail. Sailing went smoothly. However, John White had really shitty timing, and right when he got back to England, England and Spain were on the verge of going to war. Because of this ongoing war, John White could not return back to Roanoke. There were a lot of things, stopping him from setting sail again. Sadly, John White did not set sail for Roanoke for another 3 years. He arrived in August 1590, only to see that everyone was gone. The whole colony had disappeared. All of their stuff was gone, not a single trace of them. The only thing left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a fence post and the word crow carved into a tree. John, obviously frantic and worried, not knowing what had happened, he searched about 50 miles to the nearing island called Croatoan. He thought that the tree and the fence post was a message that they left behind for him, saying like, hey, we left to Croatoan Island. But he tried to set sail And sadly, both times that he tried, the weather stopped him, so he never ever made it to Croatoan. He thought that these carved words that were left behind were strange because the settlers all knew that if they were being forced to leave the island, if someone was holding them against their will, they had to scratch a Maltese cross somewhere, like as a signal to let John know that they were taken. And he searched and searched, and there was no Maltese cross anywhere. Sadly, after the two failed attempts to make a trip down to Croatoan, he couldn't try a third time because the boat wasn't his, so he had to return back to England, return the boat. You know, he just couldn't keep at it as much as he wanted to. After the failed attempts, John White moved to Ireland, and sadly he died in 1593, only 3 years after he last searched for them. And he died never knowing what happened to his family and to the colonists. To this day, no bodies or mass graves were ever found. Well, the first theory that we're going to touch upon is that the Native Americans killed them. Well, the natives didn't want to be colonized, and they were obviously traumatized from what happened the first 2 attempts. I mean, if some people came over and just murdered your leader and tortured the rest of your people, you wouldn't really be trusting of the next batch of people that come in after that. A lot of people theorize that this could have been retaliation for what the first group did, but again, there was never any mass graves found. So if there was a mass killing, you gotta ask yourself, where did all of these bones and bodies go? So theory 2 is that a disease just completely wiped out all the people of Roanoke. Their bodies weren't accustomed to the germs and things like that of the New World, since they've only ever lived in England, and you know, this was like hundreds of years ago. So yeah, the most common theory is that something similar to like a plague just wiped them out completely. But the only problem I see with that theory is that if there was a plague-like disease, wouldn't have the Native Americans caught it as well? I feel like there'd be more proof of that. And I think it'd be more likely that the settlers gave Native Americans diseases versus the other way around, because Native Americans' immune systems were very sheltered. But then the problem with that is that Native Americans have come in contact with settlers before. So I don't know. As you can see, I just see a lot of problems with this theory. But like, imagine if it really is that simple and like that's the answer. They just all got sick and died. I guess we'll just never know. Theory 3 has 2 sides to it. So the first side is that the settlers were just absorbed by a friendly neighborhood native tribe. They just took them in. They could have like cut a deal with them, because again, they were running really low on supplies. Like, they were banking on John White to make it back, like to leave and make it back within 6 months, because it takes 3 months to get there and 3 months to get back. So maybe they only had 6 months of supply, 6 months of food. The area was experiencing a drought, the worst drought in like 800 years. So the only people probably thriving were the Native Americans, because, you know, they knew in and around their land. So they could have cut a deal and been like, hey, can you take us on? But I think this theory only works if the settlers like split up, because there were so many settlers. I don't think the Native Americans would have taken all of them. The second side of this theory is that they weren't just like taken in out of the kindness of their heart. The theory goes that the Native Americans actually took the settlers as slaves. If you think about it, they were weak, they didn't have food, they didn't have supplies, they probably had like a low amount of weapons. The colony consisted of 87 men, 17 women, and 11 children. So even though there were a lot of men, if you think about it, there were probably more Native Americans in the area than there were men in this colony. So chances of them being stronger than the Native Americans are very low. So the theory goes that they killed off the men and they kept a few women and children. And you're gonna see why this theory is kind of plausible later on. Theory 4 is that the settlers resorted to cannibalism and they all died. Again, we go back to this thing where they just didn't have food, and like that movie on Netflix called The Platform, sometimes when you're hungry, there's no telling what you're capable of doing.
El hambre desata la locura.
So they were probably hungry, they were children. Sometimes moms will do crazy things for their kids. You don't know, maybe they just started eating each other until there was nobody left, because once you start eating each other, paranoia sets in and you don't know who's safe. You're just attacking each other. Then the alternate version, I hate that it just always comes back to Native Americans, because my sons were just vibing on their land, and archaeologists and historians are just like blaming them for, because if you look at most theories about the colony have to do with Native Americans. Like why is it their fault? The Europeans are the one who came and intruded on them. Like, anyways, the alternate theory is that Native Americans resorted to cannibalism and just ate the tribe, and this can explain why there were no bones left behind, because Native Americans are very resourceful. They like to use every part of the animal, so they could have also used every part of the human. They could have grinded up their bones for medicinal properties or whatever the hell you use bones for. Could explain why there was never anything found. Theory number 5, we touch on a supernatural topic, is that witches used the entire colony as human sacrifices. People of the Croatoan Island strongly believed in witches, and even those outside of the Croatoan tribe, they used to tell stories about witches who lurked in the woods and preyed on innocent people for their sacrifices and their rituals. Who knows what freaky stuff went on, because I want to make a whole separate video about how the word Croatoan has been involved in so many disappearances. Like, it's crazy. Like, a lot of people disappear and their last words are like Croatoan, or the last things they wrote in their diaries are Croatoan, or whatever. Croatoan plays like a big part in disappearances, like freaky disappearances, but another video. So we're gonna go back to the theory that said that they kept some of the settlers and let them join into their tribe. We're gonna go back to that real quick, because in 1888 a group of natives filed for aid, and they described themselves as remnants of the lost Roanoke colony. It was thought that DNA of the settlers could be found in the Native Americans, because some of them had like light eyes, gray eyes, you know, like white features that wasn't commonly found in Native Americans. And so the Ethnological Bureau, like, their educated guess was that they kept some women and children and the rest were killed, and they were kept as slaves basically, and they had kids with the Native Americans, probably like rape and stuff like that. The island was scoured many times, and artifacts of Europeans were found, but like no trace of the Europeans were found, you know, like their bones, their bodies, any DNA, any trace of them besides like their belongings. So they could have just left. That's a possibility. They could have just not went to Croatoan. They could have went inland, you know, somewhere else. That's all the theories I really have. Now I'm just gonna talk about like stuff that was found. So there was this big break in the case, because a tourist found this stone, this regular rock, but it had stuff carved into it. So she turned it in and it was examined, and this started what was called the Dare Stone collection. Now, Dare probably sounds familiar to you because John White's daughter was named Elizabeth White Dare, and her child was called Virginia Dare. So Dare was the last name. They're called Dare stones because it's believed that these stones were carved by Elizabeth. So it's not known if all the stones are actually real and were carved by Elizabeth, but it is said that the original stone is carved by Elizabeth. The reason that they feel that the first stone is authentic is because it matched the tools that they have. You know, science is crazy nowadays. And then the language that was used on the rock also matched the language that was used back then. So on the first stone, I'm like, you're not really gonna understand the old English, so just like in plain English, it said on the stone that Eleanor's daughter Virginia and her husband are dead, and if someone could tell her father, and it had her father's name on it. And then on the back of the stone, it said that only 7 of the Roanoke settlers were still alive. It said that the natives killed the rest of them, and the stone was signed EWD, which is Eleanor White Dare, so her initials. Then a couple other stones were found, but again, we don't know how real they are. In 1599, there was a stone that said that survivors of Roanoke are safe. They're with the tribe in Nakuchi Valley in Georgia. I probably said that name so wrong. But then another stone popped up that said that it was from 1599 that said Eleanor is dead and her daughter Agnes is alive, right? Then there was another stone with the date 1598, and it said that Eleanor married the local chief of a Native American tribe, and the natives were very angry about that. Then another stone said that Eleanor had given birth to the child of the chief, and the natives were really angry. They hated it. And on the stone, she was asking if her father could please take the child back to England because it wasn't safe. It's just, you know, it's just all like hearsay. Like, there's no like real proof of anything. But even if they did move inland, even if they were safe all those years, why did they leave Roanoke? Like, why didn't they leave a map? Why didn't, you know, there's just so many questions still unanswered, and sadly, we probably won't ever get those answers. We'll just never know.